My other introduction is, of course, to Zach Adams, our presenter this morning. Zach is a Hope grad and taught in the Zealand schools for a long time, uh, even though he looks like he just graduated, but he did. And during that time, got a master's degree from Michigan State University in educational technology and was discovered by Hope College. And he is now a digital technology specialist. I can't keep it all straight, but I hope he takes a couple minutes to tell you about what he's actually doing in his job at Hope College. It's very interesting and very timely. So he is here to tell us all about AI. Zach Adams. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. I first just want to say thank you for coming today. I know the weather isn't the best to be out in. Obviously, this is a topic that a lot of people are interested in to learn about. So thank you again for making the trip over here today. As Gordon said, my name is Zachary Adams. Here's a little bit about me. I put the question, why him? Because I do know I have like a baby face. So people look at me like, wow, like how can this guy know this stuff at his age? I got mistaken as a student this past week. I traveled with 19 Hope students to California. They were presenting their research at the National Conference for Undergraduate Research. And I got mistaken as one of them, but I was actually one of their chaperones. So you might be asking, why him, right? So there's just a couple of my accolades on the screen, right? I did some research when I was a student here looking at educational technology and pre-service teachers' attitudes about it. I did some additional research once I was in my kindergarten and first grade classroom about their use of technology. I worked in Zealand where we quickly became a one-to-one district. So every student had a digital device in their hands starting in kindergarten. So we wanted to understand why did they make certain choices when using it. Then I got my master's degree from Michigan State University in educational technology right before COVID. My program was all online, so it was really fitting to learn that way. And then as soon as COVID hit, I taught in that way as well. And then I came to Hope in 2022, where I became the digital instruction specialist. My title has changed a little bit. We took digital out of it because we recognized that there were some faculty who were reluctant to reach out because of digital in the title, right? My background's in education and teaching, and good teaching is good teaching, whether it's with technology or without it. So I wanted to focus on the pedagogy side of things, be able to talk about the technology, but not make it the focal point exactly, right? And then I also talk about when ChatGPT came into the picture. Now, I did not study AI before coming to Hope College, or I did not study it during my master's program. It really was as soon as ChatGPT came out, this fear of what does it now mean for higher education and learning. And so I quickly had to dive into it to support the faculty on campus, because my role primarily is assisting faculty in ways of using technology for instruction and understanding ways that students might use it to complete work. So we will meet together and decide, well, do we need to maybe design a new classroom activity, or do you have to be in a different classroom space to get the kinds of learning that you want to take place? So hopefully today I'll be able to walk you through some of this new AI that's coming out, the things that you may have heard, new ways of using it. At your tables, you should have some index cards. Those are there for questions, or if you just want to take notes, there will be a follow-up to this session next week. So if we don't have time to answer everybody's question, feel free to write it on the note card. I'll take those back with me, and I'll be able to prepare for next week and answer some of your questions. This is our agenda today. This is what I hope that we can go through. I'll do a quick introduction to AI, maybe talk about where it started, where it's going, specifically in media, whether it's journalism, online media, podcasts. We'll talk about some of that and its credibility and the challenges associated with credibility with using AI. I'll do a quick demonstration of AI in education. It is fairly new, and there's a lot of policy that's being written about it. But we'll talk about embedding AI ethics into curriculum. And then I'm going to do a showcase of hands-on activities with AI, a couple different models. I'll showcase ChatGPT. That's probably one that everyone's somewhat familiar with, but also showcase ones that instructors are using and even teachers in the K-12 world are using. So this is AI over the years. As you can see, it started well before 2022, right? And what you might notice from some of these dates is that it's pretty isolated, right? Something happened, there's a big gap, something else happened, and it probably is happening in a different field, right? So AI is not new, but what's new is the way and the amount of data it can go through, which is a little staggering. So this, again, just quick introduction to AI over the years. What I am most concerned about and what I try to pay attention to is this idea of how quickly AI gets to a human level of understanding, right? So if you look at early 2000s, it was somewhat getting up to human level understanding or human level performance, but more recently, they're able to do it faster and across a lot of different disciplines. And what's new about this is a lot of these models can now communicate with each other. So it just supports them learning at a more rapid pace, right? So you may have heard the term artificial general intelligence or AGI, right? That's the idea that AI can perform at or above human level for any task possible. Some researchers believe that we're 5 years away from that. Some believe we're a little closer based on advancements that we've already seen. But those are things that some companies are working towards, this AGI. Okay. I want to take a second to kind of walk through what that means and help you recognize you've already interacted with AI and you might not have known it, or you might have helped AI learn and you might not have known it. So quick show of hands if anyone's recognized something like this on a device. Okay, right? You probably get really annoyed when it's asking you to pick on the traffic lights and that tiny little corner showing, and you're like, I don't know if I should. It doesn't show the light, it just shows the actual box for it, right? You might have seen that. It might have taken you a couple attempts and you're trying to prove to them, I'm not a robot, right? I'm a human. Get me onto the thing I'm searching for. Well, this is called CAPTCHA, and it's a way for models to recognize images. So you helped AI learn how to recognize images by doing those things. Right? You may have seen stuff like this too, right? Which is not great for people that might be hard of seeing, right? Or be able to put different letters and numbers in there, right? But again, this is another form of training models to recognize numbers and letters. And that dreaded box of saying, I'm not a robot, and then trying to type in those things. And maybe you get a couple different chances at doing that. So those are all different ways that you have interacted with AI or training AI and not known about it. And again, these things have been happening for years before ChatGPT. Right? I do also want to talk about this distinction between curation AI and creation. Creation is kind of what got delivered with ChatGPT, right? This new generative function, but there's been curation AI for a really long time now, right? Curation AI comes in the form of social media, right? So if you have Facebook, there's algorithms that curate the content that you see, and you're teaching it by liking, disliking, commenting on people's posts, and it will force different information your way, right? We clearly saw that in the past election, people got different views on Facebook, and we're seeing different messages and things like that. What's different about creation, it takes a direct human input, right? So you have to type something to get a response back. Now, AIs are advancing, and now it's not just typing something. Well, you can talk to something. You can use your voice to get some of those prompts back, right? So we'll talk about these two different things, but also discuss other ways that you've been interacting with AI and maybe haven't known it. So curation AI comes in a lot of different forms. As I said before, one of the forms is social media, but another one is Netflix. Anyone have Netflix accounts? All right, maybe binged Suits. Did anyone watch Suits recently? Yeah. So you're teaching the Netflix algorithm, what are you interested in? And it will start recommending different shows to you, right? Spotify, Pandora, any music that you listen to online, again, is an algorithm where you're teaching it what is your musical taste, what do you want to hear, what do you want to listen to more often, but also in the ads that get sent your way. You get targeted ads, right? You might have been like visiting a store and all of a sudden you're hearing on Pandora or Spotify or iHeartRadio, why are they talking to me about Lowe's, right? Well, it used your graphical data to make a targeted ad for you, right? So some people think of Alexa always listening to you or your phone's always listening to. It might not just be listening to, it's tracking your data, your location too, and it gets used to feed you information, right? YouTube is a big one. I don't know if anyone has ever logged into YouTube and then you get certain results. If you log out and you only uses your geographical location, you get a lot of different views of YouTube, right? So if you've ever done that before or looked at a neighbor's YouTube preferences, you will see very different content. And it's all trying to make it individualized and personalized to you specifically, right? Google News, and we'll talk more about news and how AI gets used in it. It's trying to give you specific things that, again, it thinks you're interested in. And the danger is that you could be trapped in a filter bubble where you're not recognizing information from other point of views or other parts of the world, and you're only focused on things that is directly in your face. And Amazon with shopping recommendations, right? Or testing, oh, if I lower this price, is that person more likely going to buy it, right? Or if I offer free shipping, are they going to buy it? Again, ways that AI has already been integrated into your life, and you might not have known it because it's not this generative AI that came with ChatGPT, right? So creation AI, again, different. This takes direct human input. You have to get involved. You have to tell it something. So new things are like text generation. That's where a lot of people get scared that college students are just going to have AI write their essays for them, right? They put in a prompt, write an essay about anything really, and it will spit out large form text, but you can do a lot of different formats. I've heard people do it for keynote addresses. I watched a video where someone said that they wanted to give a keynote address in the style of Steve Jobs, right, who has passed away, but it gave a keynote address in that style. That person just had to then perform it like Steve Jobs. I don't know if they wore the turtleneck and New Balance shoes or not, possibly. We have image generation. You may have seen some of these images before. Some of them are kind of cartoony and not super detailed. That's changing, and I'll showcase some images today. One that just got in the news a little bit ago, this music generation AI, where you can say, well, make a song in the style of Taylor Swift, right? Or use her voice. So a lot of artists signed this letter saying we got to stop the advancement of AI, specifically in music. We have video generation. I'm going to showcase some videos to you today, and you'll have to decide which ones are AI generated, which ones were generated by humans. It's actually a really interesting game, but also kind of scary. And then one that I've been interacting with a little bit recently is code generation. And I understand you may have had a session earlier learning about how maybe computer scientists or programmers are looking at AI. Well, this is really interesting, being able to develop code faster. But that also means that these algorithms could get bigger and a little bit crazier. I'm actually taking a coding class through a Harvard online program, and they have a built-in chat feature that uses AI to help me learn how to code without giving me the answers. So I think that might be a way that higher ed integrates it into classrooms. So we're going to do an experiment where you are going to kind of compete against AI a little bit, okay? So I just want to prep you. The picture that you're seeing on the screen is how I'd like you to interact in the classroom, right? So the people in the tables are going to just turn and talk to each other. So there'd be like groups of 4 primarily. If you're sitting in some of the chairs, you can kind of move up and meet with people. But what we're going to do is create a story. And you may have done this game maybe in the car as a kid, or maybe you do it with if you have grandchildren. Each person is only allowed to say one word at a time, right? So I might say the, and you might say there. So we started a story about the apple, and then the next person would go and say one word, right? And the way what we're going to do that is that each of you has your own knowledge about so many different topics. but I'm going to give you a topic that you should create a story about. And this is exactly what generative text AI does. I give it a prompt and it combs its database for all the things associated with that prompt to create a story in written form. Right? So this is what you are going to do. Okay. So if you can, turn right now the way the picture is shown on the screen and just introduce yourself to your story making partners. Okay. If you can hear my voice, just raise your hand. Awesome. Again, if you can hear my voice, give me a thumbs up. All right. If you can hear my voice, put a hand on your head. All right. Exactly. There we go. It also works with middle school students, right? They have the same attention spans. Okay. Like I said, everyone has to have the exact same topic, right? Because you want to be able to share each other's knowledge base. And I've thought that because we're in Holland and we're getting close to a specific time of the year, I thought it would be best if we make a story about tulip time. Okay. So I'm going to give you some time now. If anyone repeats a word, your story stops. Okay. If anyone says more than 2 words, your story stops. So I'll give you some time to maybe go around once and see how you do, and then we'll do it for real. Okay. Tulip time. Yes. So Holland tulip time. Does that sound okay? Does anyone have any questions? All right. Again, you only get 1 word. Yes. No, you're just going to say it. Yeah, just plain. All right. Are we all good? All right. Go ahead. All right. Hopefully that was a good practice round. All right. Okay. Now, I'm curious. Raise your hand if your group used the word during. Oh, interesting. Only 1 group. Raise your hand if your group used the word tourist. Okay. Okay. Raise your hand if your group used the word pictures. Okay. Raise your hand if your group used the word parade. Okay. Raise your hand if your group used the word Dutch. Interesting. Okay. Now, again, this was an experiment to see, like, based on everyone's knowledge, and I'm sure there's some of you that have a very extensive knowledge of tulip time, and maybe there are those that maybe don't have as much. But your stories may have sounded similar, right? Or you may have had different ideas about what happens around tulip time or what gets focused on during tulip time, right? And that's the same idea that happens when you interact with generative AI. Is I could sit down, ask it a prompt. You could sit down, ask it the same prompt, but we're going to get something a little bit different every single time we do it. Because every time you do it, it combs its data and it's trying to make new patterns and predictions in its use. Okay. Now, again, that was our practice round, right? You got used to listening to each other. You might have to maybe lean in to hear each other a little bit more. Again, we're going to make a story about tulip time, and I gave you some keywords that you might interject into your story. All right. So take a second, turn to your neighbors, think about who wants to. Yes, good. You can start a new one, but you can use your knowledge on the last one, right? So that's how AI works. All right, go ahead, make a new story with your group. Okay, we're gonna bring it back together. Thank your group mates. Hopefully you created a great Pulitzer Prize winning story about tulip time. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully, all right. If you can hear my voice, just raise your hand. Awesome. Well, hopefully you had fun doing that. Hopefully you were able to maybe relive some stories about past experiences during tulip time. Now, working in Holland during tulip time is very difficult. I tried not to cross 8th Street at all. I live on the north side. And if I have to, I only bike into work because it is miserable trying to find a parking spot and just navigate through the parades and the different times, right? So maybe you focused on the positives of tulip time, right? The flowers, the weather, the happiness that there is a Hope graduation and it's like new beginnings for them, right? But maybe you focus on the negatives too, especially if you're a local and experiencing all the tourists or the visitors coming to town, right? I wanted to do that activity so that you could see when AI is doing those same things, it's happening so quickly, right? And as you recognize working with each other in your group, well, you all have a different knowledge base or different understanding, and AIs do that too, right? So if I were interacting with ChatGPT and then decide to interact with, like, let's say Google's AI, it has different knowledge base, has different data to build on. So I might combine both uses to create a better story or a better interaction or a better essay if I was a student, right? So you may know where AI has been, right? We just talked about its growth over the years and its getting to the level of human understanding or human knowledge. But where is AI right now? Some of the things I want to talk about up here is this idea of, well, curation AI, creation AI, it's being mixed together, right? The data sets are getting really, really big. Data is now gold, so to speak. It's kind of that big gold rush. You may have seen that commercial with Matthew McConaughey, all created with AI. He's in basically a gold rush city. We have now voice assistants, right? So Siri and Alexa, they're getting more advanced AI. There are now AI pins, so clothing pins that you can wear that has a voice assistant called Humane, right? And you can just talk in your typical language, and it would automatically translate to someone, right? It can capture, you can ask it directions of places. It uses a laser where you can shine on your hand and say, call mom or call my sister, and it would call them, right? So that's kind of where we're at now. And you can purchase that and use it right now. It's not something that's off into the future. This other thing, this idea of generative AI making personalized ads, right? So now it's not just sending you personalized ads on Facebook, but it's making videos and pictures and text that are personalized to you, right? Which is a little interesting. As I said, I just traveled from Long Beach, California yesterday with 19 Hope students. And it got me thinking about this idea of AI being integrated into air traffic, right? And you may have known about A/B testing, so how much pricing gets changed based on one person to the next person. Now with AI, it's not A/B, it's A through Z. So it can test rapidly and make changes. So I was watching our flight get delayed every 5 minutes. I'm wondering, okay, how is AI determining if I get delayed or if I get canceled? How are we going to rebook 21 people flying from Long Beach to Chicago Midway trying to get to Grand Rapids? And as we're talking to someone from Pennsylvania who's also on our flight, right? So that's where AI is now. It's being integrated into almost everything. Any golfers in the room? Yeah. Anyone see Callaway's new driver that has AI infused, or TaylorMade's new driver that was designed with AI to be more forgiveness and give you longer distance? It's amazing what AI can be used for, but also a little scary about what it can be used for, right? In the computer science programming world, there is this debate about how should models be put out into the public, right? Should people have access to these open models where they can then take its data sets and train their own version of AI, or should it be closed down, right? So OpenAI, who created ChatGPT, is obviously open. I can decide to get its API, its application program index, and use it for however I want. And there's other programs that are very closed, and I can't see how it gets used. I can only interact with it, right? So there is that debate. Should they be open? What restrictions are going to be put on them? Who puts those restrictions on them? So that's still being discussed at a very slow rate as it's advancing very quickly. So again, things that might be a little alarming. The next thing is this rapid pace of improvement, right? So the leader in graphical processing units, the things that help AI run quickly, the leader advances almost every month. So it can go through data, and the amount of data it can go through increases. So the AIs can advance really quickly. And that leader in GPU advancements owns 80% of the market. So they're driving everyone else's use, right?
What does GPU mean?
Graphical processing unit. So that's what gets put into computers to go through data really quickly, right? And you might be thinking, well, how do I keep up with all of this changing so quickly, right? And that's something I constantly think too, because there are places that you can go and you can literally refresh your web page, and every 5 minutes there will be different AI interfaces on it, which is alarming, but also wondering, like, what does that mean for what I do, for the work, for the education that I'm involved in, right? So every day I read something called the Neuron newsletter, and I'm going to give you access to this presentation, which has the hyperlinks. But I read that, and it's a great way to condense AI news, but allow me to see what advancements are happening in the world of AI. Okay. So that's where AI has been, where it is currently. And the next thing is the idea of it being influenced in the news, right? And who's adopting and who's not adopting. In the next part of my presentation, I have a couple different videos that I'm going to show short clips from. And again, I want to iterate that I'm going to give you access to this. So we're not going to watch the whole thing. You can go back and look at it, or I'm going to make it available for HASP to send out. But I want to showcase a couple different ways that AI is being used in the news specifically.
How are journalists using artificial intelligence in their work?
Journalism AI, a project of Polis, the journalism think tank at the LSE, supported by the Google News Initiative, spoke to newsrooms across the globe to understand the future of AI and the news. More than 100 newsrooms took part in the survey, which spanned 46 countries across 6 continents. Here are some of the trends they uncovered. Since the release of generative AI tools like ChatGPT or Google Bard, there's been explosive growth in the use of AI across many industries, and journalism is no exception. Newsrooms around the world are experimenting with the new AI tools and are starting to use them to support their work. We found that they're using AI to generate content, engage their audiences on social media, and assist in various ways in newsrooms. Everything from streamlining processes, writing code, image generation, authoring summaries, and improving how content is presented. In one newsroom, generative AI was used to create a presenter and their program, from how they look to what they say, the type of voice they have. Everything is AI, but supervised. In all, more than 80% of respondents say they foresee a lot more application of artificial intelligence in their newsrooms in the near future, and that new tools present opportunities that other AI innovations have not provided. But they are more divided about whether the technology also brings a unique set of challenges. So,
Pause there and just turn to someone next to you and say your initial reaction to that, or a question that you're still wondering based on that information that was presented. Okay, so turn to someone next. Initial reaction.
how would you?
All right. I heard a lot of scary instantly, right? I also heard this idea of like, well, then how do I know what is AI, what's not AI, right? And we'll talk about that too. There are some safeguards that are being talked about and put into place, so we'll talk about that, right? In that video, I talked about this idea of, well, content creation, deciding like how to get to consumers more and more efficiently, and the news that they want to see, right? Sometimes it's hard to go through the headlines and be like, well, I don't care about some of this stuff, right? Without getting stuck in your filter bubble, let's make sure we focus on that, right? As I was preparing for this presentation, I wanted to do research and understand like, okay, well, that's how AI might get used. Well, how is it currently getting used, and what do news organizations think of it, right? So a research study that I read focused on 35 news organizations from the United States, United Kingdom, and Germany, and they had a lot of different attitudes around AI. One of the attitudes they had is they almost feel like they have to keep up, right? It's hard to find newspapers anywhere today. Almost everything is digital, and that's part of the problem, is that the model is changing, and it's changing so quickly. They're trying to grasp onto anything to still have a life in news and a life in journalism. So that's part of it, this idea of technology is advancing and market pressures are advancing, and especially with let's say, fringe ways of getting the news, right? So different generations look at news differently. Younger generations might only get news from TikTok, which that's a scary thing in and of itself, right? Or YouTube, or not just watching it on TV, getting it from blog posts and things like that. So people who might not actually be journalists or from journalistic companies, right? They're also finding ways to be more efficient. So how can they be more efficient in getting the news out and making sure that it's more reliable without that bottom quote, without getting the lack of transparency in AI systems that comes up with those creepy errors, right? So that's what I looked at and focused on, like, okay, I'm still wondering why they're using it and what AI they're going to be using. So this is a list from that research that showcased, here's all the ways that news organizations are using AI, but here are the ones I want to focus on: audience trends, analytics, and story detection. So understand, what are the best stories to tell, right? I've watched the news several times, like, there has to be something better than this that they can tell a story about, right? But they're using AI to figure out what is the best story to tell and what trends can we look at, right? This is one I really like, this idea of transcription and translation. If you've looked at news online, you might have started to notice at the very top, it will often say how long it might take to read that story, but there'll also be an audio that you can listen to that story being read to you. Well, that's all being generated by AI. And that's great because it makes the news more accessible for people. Another way is tagging content, right? So if you can search for specific headlines or specific content that you want to see, search engine optimization suggestions. So if you go to Google or you're looking something up about Holland, well, you only want to see stuff about Holland, not about somewhere else, right? So making sure those tags are correct. Okay. And the next one I thought was most interesting, this idea of dynamic paywalls. So paywalls are usually the ad that you get of like, oh, if you pay $10 a month, you can see the rest of the story, right? Well, AI gets used to determine how much are you more likely going to pay and how far into the story should that pop up for you to want to read the rest, right? So analyzing those things as you're engaging with the content, right? There's this YouTube creator who he is super popular and he analyzes tech and cars and things like that. And he made a video about this new AI, video generation AI that ChatGPT came out with called Sora. Has anyone heard of that? Okay, a couple of you. Well, we're gonna watch a quick little video of him discussing this because we'll also look at some samples of those videos a little bit. Now, I just want to warn you, it's amazing how lifelike some of these videos are and how we won't be able to tell eventually what's AI and what's not.
Stylized image or whatever you want. Same thing with Sora, but now since it's videos, it also needs to understand how all these things like reflections and textures and materials and physics all interact with each other over time to make a reasonable looking video. And of course, right away, there's a bunch of examples on their website that are crazy. Now, before I show you these, I just need you to keep this in mind. You're about to watch a bunch of AI generated videos, and you know that you're about to watch a bunch of AI generated content. So your brain, you're already looking for this stuff, and it's not perfect. You will find imperfections, but not everybody who sees AI generated content on the internet knows to be looking for that. So also keep that in mind. This is also the worst that this technology is going to be from here on out. So, okay, here's one of the videos. There's no audio to any of these clips, but the prompt for this one is a stylish woman walks down a Tokyo street filled with warm, glowing neon and animated city signage. She wears a black leather jacket, a long red dress, and black boots. This video is already miles ahead of where we were. It has accurate lighting, it has materials, it has skin tones, movements, it even has reflections all over the place. Now, of course, if you look at it for more than about 10 seconds very closely, there are lots of giveaways. Like this dude in the background kind of looks like he's gliding in a weird way. The frame rates and the reflections in the water are for some reason lower than the rest of the video. The camera movement overall is just a bit inconsistent, and it just, I don't know, it just kind of feels a little bit off. But then again, this is where we were 1 year ago. So just keep that in the back of your head for all this. Okay, how about this one? This is another one which has a long prompt about a camera following behind a white vintage SUV with a black roof rack as it speeds up a steep dirt road. This is also, again, really good. It kind of looks a little more video gamey because of how rock solid the drone footage is, but clearly very usable. Here's another one. A litter of golden retriever puppies playing in the snow. Their heads pop in and out of the snow, covered in it. It's so good. It feels like the physics of the fur and the ears and everything with the snow flying around in slow motion is incredible. I've looked through all of the sample videos on OpenAI's website, and clearly these are the handpicked best ones that they chose to share, where they just put in some text and then get a video and don't modify it. But there's really impressive stuff in there. Some of it has humans, some of it doesn't. Some of it is more realistic feeling, like the truck driving one, but some of them are more video gamey or more stylized. A lot of it is slow motion. I just have to say, how insanely fast these models are improving is genuinely, like, that's the shocking part. Like, I remember not even stylized image or whatever.
So clearly, these videos advanced really quickly, right? We saw the AI generated video of Will Smith eating spaghetti just a year ago, and that was terrible. And that was obviously generated by AI, where the videos that they show in this example is very hard to tell. And again, you know that you're watching AI created videos, right? So finding the things that you should be looking for. I do want to mention a safeguard in some of those. If you looked really closely at the bottom right corner, there's a watermark, but those are really easy to crop out, right? So the idea of putting safeguards in there is maybe not the best way to do it right now, right? So organizations will start tagging things online to say this is AI generated at the very beginning. So as you look at it, you'll get a little bit better understanding. Yes.
Do you know what's the source of the rapid improvement? Is it better training or better coding?
It's a mixture of both. That was a great question. Mixture of both. It's a lot of it too is, as I said, those graphical processing units, because they can go through data so quickly. That is a major part of improvement, but also the training and the data that gets trained on. Recently, ChatGPT got in trouble because they used, I think it was like 1 million hours of YouTube to be able to create some of its content. And the problem with some of that is that's the company deciding to use it or not use it. Us as users, we can put anything into the programs that we want to generate content from. So it's not stopping people to take YouTube videos, put it into a video generation program, and then create new videos off of that. Right. So that's part of the distinction. Again, those open models, we can interact with it a little bit differently versus closed models. We can only do certain things, and they'll restrict us from not being able to ask certain prompts and stuff like that. I do want to take one more question and I'm going to move on.
Is the difference in 1 year mostly the size of the database and the experience working with that increased size of database?
Partially. One thing we also need to keep in mind is that as these AIs are being developed, they're also learning from past AIs, right? So it can create synthetic data. So it's data that is not actual real. It was generated by AI in the first place. And so because it can generate synthetic data, it can run these models countless times and not get tired, right? So it's constantly learning and improving on itself. And it can only do that when the graphical processing units can handle more data. And so as those increase, then these models can increase quickly too. Those are good questions. All right. So clearly with these videos and with this idea of AI being interjected into the news, there's a question of credibility. How do I know what I'm reading or what I'm watching is true and honest and who generated it? And from that study about 35 news organizations, they are still wondering that too. And some of them take more pride in that than others, right? So certain news organizations will say, well, we don't want to use it, or we're going to use it at a limited scale, and we have to have so much human input or so much humans looking at the output of the AI that we can catch it if it makes an error or not, right? So some news organizations that got in trouble for passing off AI content was CNET. You know, CNET, they look at and review technologies. But Sports Illustrated also got in trouble for posting articles written by AI and not telling people that they were written by AI. And if you read a lot of AI generated content, you can kind of tell, but it's getting better to the point where you can't tell. And that's part of the issue, right? One of the things I do want to mention here is that last bullet point. Right now, AIs do have this feature called hallucinations, where it's making up content and programmers don't know why. And that's frightening. But But where students get in trouble is because students don't necessarily have the critical thinking ability to look at it and then want to double check, triple check multiple times to make sure this is accurate. So it will often create fake sources. It will look real. It'll look like this article exists. It will often create a link to that article that looks like it should be on Google somewhere. But if you click on it, it doesn't exist, right? So that's one way that faculty and instructors are kind of catching students. They'll check their sources and be like, oh, you cited something that is not real. You must have used ChatGPT, right? So that's one way. And news organizations are in that same position. They don't want to put put something in the article that might be a hallucination, might not be accurate, right? Because then it affects their credibility and they'll lose even more of their audience. A further thing is this idea of like production. How do they keep up with putting out the news, and how much as an audience can we handle? Right? It's already very difficult to stay on top of the things that are happening around the world and in our local community. With this ability to put out news quickly, it's only going to make it that much more difficult, and we're almost going to be drowning in the information that gets presented. And now we're wrestling with, well, is this information human generated, AI generated? Do we care? Do we not care? How much of a mixture do we want to be able to recognize, and what's important? Right. So there's a quote there about this idea of using it for distribution. I think there's going to be interesting studies coming out soon about people's how we change the way we receive information. Right? I was part of a group that submitted a grant proposal to develop an AI research center where we wanted to look at that specifically. What is our relationship with information and information's relationship with us because of AI? Right. Again, more ethical questions about using it for guidelines. Who's setting those guidelines right now? Companies and organizations are making their own because we don't have any specific ones, federally at least. And then states are also making their own for schools. There are certain states that have made AI policy relating to AI use in K-12, but not necessarily blanket across higher education. So again, more quotes about the use of AI ethically, creating images, tagging those images, or for misleading people. One thing to keep in mind, again, these are from reputable media companies. That's not stopping people on the fringe, on the outside, to generate their own news in a way that might be disruptive. So that's something to be thinking about as we get into this next cycle of elections or news stories that get put out. Is where is our news coming from, and who are we trusting with the information that gets presented to us? Right. And here's a story again about companies that might be using it and not really caring about putting out junk, but some news organizations are still focused on putting out quality news and focusing on the human aspect of telling a story and not just the efficient aspect of telling a story. But at the bottom line, it all goes to motives. Why are they doing these things? The motive to put out information and inform the public, or is there a motive of just showcasing opinions? So I put a couple different quotes there about why people might be using it and how to be using it. I interact with AI every single day. I use it on a daily basis in multiple different ways. Motives come down to, can I get this done quickly, right? At the same result that I would have if it took me a couple hours, right? But also motives come down to, why would I want to offload my skill set to something else, right? Does it allow me to gain a skill in another place, right? Or to spend more time focusing on a weakness where I don't necessarily have to always do it myself using my strengths. Anyone listen to podcasts? All right. There's a really great podcast that is 100% AI generated, right? Which talks about news in the AI. It's called Discover Daily. I get it on Spotify, is where I get it. But I'm going to showcase an example here because it gives 5 usually 5-minute news stories. But again, I want to talk about it was curated by AI, it's created by AI, and the voice you hear is AI. Right? So there is no human influence in this at all.
Hi there, and welcome to Discover Daily by Perplexity. I'm your host, Alex, and my voice is powered by 11 Labs. Today, we're diving into some headlines like Google's potential paywall for AI search features, a reboot of the Matrix franchise, and artists taking a stand against AI in music. Let's begin. Google is reportedly considering implementing a paywall for certain premium artificial intelligence-powered search features. This would be a major shift in Google's business model, marking the first time the tech giant has placed any of its core products behind a paywall. Sources say Google is exploring options to include some advanced AI search capabilities in its premium subscription services. This move reflects Google's efforts to monetize its AI technologies amidst increasing competition. It also aligns with their initiatives to support digital publishers in determining which content to put behind paywalls. Google's potential paywall for AI search represents a strategic move to enhance revenue streams while maintaining leadership in the ever-evolving search engine market.
And so,
Hi there,
as
and
I
welcome
said,
to
well, yes, they're using paywalls, but they're also using AI to understand how much you're willing to pay to get access to those AI tools, right? So it's all being used all together. I don't listen to this every day because I find the voice a little disturbing. But it's just fascinating that it is being generated at such a quick rate and that there is no human influence in this at all of what stories get picked and how they get told and how much time each story is being discussed, right? So again, very interesting one that you could listen to learn more about that. I want to take this time to answer a question, but also we're going to transition into what might this mean for learning as well. Look, there might be some online questions.
Yeah, we have a question online. How, with inaccurate information on the web, how does the AI filter the information?
That's a wonderful question. So without knowing too much about the programming, the computer science and the algorithms, I'm assuming that it's going to look at those sources and how often those sources are showing up on the internet and where it gets in the data from in the first place, right? I am going to showcase using Perplexity, so the program that this podcast used to get its news, and I'll show you what sources get presented after we ask it a question. So yes, looks like we have a question up here.
The video we just saw was completely generated by AI. But what was input to initiate AI to do that?
Yeah, nothing from so as users, we can't do any of that to make that podcast. That one is made specifically by a AI company, and we don't know what they put in to generate it. And that's also this idea of transparency, what gets put in to get the result. There's been interesting studies too to look at, well, how does AI get used in medical fields, right? And what data does medical fields have access to make a prediction about a diagnosis or a prescription that someone should take, or the likelihood of going through an operation and what and things like that. So again, we don't know sometimes the data that gets used. And if an AI system is super accurate, it might not be able to spit back out to us and tell us the data that it did use. So there's other factors that go into how things get presented our way. In regards to learning methods and the idea of like, how is this affecting education, not only in higher ed, but in the K-12 world too, instructors are having to rethink ways of teaching and how to teach it, right? I know sometimes it's just easy to say, well, I won't allow technology at all. I'll just go strictly back to paper and pencil. I think that's coming at a place of fear and not knowledge, right? And helping students understand the use of it in a ethical way, in an accountability way, and also understand ways that it can benefit their learning and their skill sets. So it's also impacting the assessment of learning. A lot of things are transitioning from being able to turn it online to I need to see you do it in person with my own eyes, right? So that's affecting methods of classroom design too. There is a huge digital divide before AI, but now it's being exacerbated because of AI. Who has access to some of these programs, and should institutions provide access to students? So because my research is all around technology, I pay for the premium version of ChatGPT, which is $20 a month. Well, if the students are trying to be competitive and one has money to pay for that, and the other ones don't, they're using the free version, which has a knowledge base that isn't as current. Well, that digital divide is getting wider, right? And now it's impacting their academics too, and how quickly they can learn and partake in the learning, right? There is also this change in what it means to have skill sets. There's this book, which is available at the Hope Library, by Joseph Aoun. He's the president of Northeastern University, called Robot Proof, Higher Education in Age of Artificial Intelligence. And he calls for a new skill set called human literacy. So he talks about digital literacy, our ability to interact with technology and feel competent in that. He talks about AI literacy, so our ability to interact with AI and understand what's going on behind the scenes and what that means when we get an output. But we also need to understand our interaction with each other. And that's almost becoming more important when everything is transitioning to computer or AI, right? So this is an extremely fascinating book. It was written in 2016. So the ideas that he talks about in regards to AI are a little dated, because he says that some things won't be possible, but they're already here. I've done a couple different reading groups with faculty where we discuss this book and how it's going to impact the way we teach in our classes. One way that it's impacting faculty specifically is they're now testing their assignments with AI to understand, oh, if I ask a student to write this essay, what would it look like if AI wrote it? And then do I change the way I do this assignment, right? So it's changing not only from faculty looking at, I just need to see your output, to I need to see and understand your process for learning something, right? So it's not just sit in class, listen to a lecture, turn in a paper in a week, and I'll give you a grade. It's sit in class, let's talk, tell me what you know, what you don't know, and why, and then turn in your paper, which you need to prove you didn't use AI to do, and then I'll give you a grade. These are the most common AIs that get used, right? So ChatGPT gets more use than Netflix, gets more use than Pinterest, gets more use than even the New York Times, which is wild. And then these are the tools that get most used within education. So some of it is for homework help, right? There are programs for AI detection, but we've realized that those are very biased towards English speaking learners, right? Because most of the data on the internet is in English, right? But then there's also one called Magic School, and I'm going to show you that one today too. Within AI in education, there is also this push for ethics to understand when is it ethical to use AI, what data is ethical to give AI to spit out results. And there's a fascinating book that got written in 2022 about ethical machines and how businesses should think about integrating AI into their workforce, and also for banks to understand how to use AI ethically, whether approving or disapproving people of getting loans or getting a mortgage for a home and things like that. So these are some questions that came from Cornell about how should we think about AI being integrated into our classrooms and talking to students about that. Right? So as these get developed and we're asking these questions, they're getting put into more courses and having students to think about, well, you're not only sitting in a biology class right now, let's think about if we use AI in this class, what data should or should we not use and why, who's going to be impacted by the use of that data, who's going to be impacted by the results of the research that come out of using AI. This book is also in the Hope Library if you're interested in reading it. All right, so we've come to the time where we're going to do some live demonstrations using AI. Some of these you may have seen before. Some of them might be brand new to you, but I do want to showcase one last video looking at AI generated images and videos.
Welcome to the latest in AI video generation. It's terrifying, hilarious, and impressive, and often all three of these things at once. And it feels like it came out of nowhere. Before today, earlier AI-generated videos had some fairly obvious telltale signs that they weren't real. And videos like this one of AI-generated Will Smith eating spaghetti and this one of a beer party with a random firestorm in the middle of it probably went viral for those reasons. These new ones generated by Sora will probably also go viral, but for a different and much more sinister reason. Because it's getting so good, many of us won't be able to tell it's AI generated, not even when we know it is. I mean, unless you're this guy who still finds it fairly obvious. I've been following AI generated stuff for ages. I knew it would get better, but wasn't sure how much better, nor how quickly it would improve. And this new video generating technology seems to jump my expectations by a few years, because it seems to get motion right. Even really difficult motion, like walking animations, where you'd expect AI to make a few bone-breaking mistakes from time to time. But most of the time, it just looks right. Even the way different body parts move and flex, the way earrings jangle about, and so on. It's good enough to pass at a glance, but it's also good enough to pass a more thorough inspection. What I'd expect with confused AI videos such as this one would be where stuff goes out of view for a while and then comes back in again. Take a look at these two people walking in the background. They go behind her, and then they come out again, looking the same. Somehow this video has remembered how they looked, where they were, and so on. But can it do it again? Yes. They found a way of generating entire videos at once, which apparently gets around these previous limitations with stability. It might not always be perfect, but it's still a lot better than it has any right to be. This video, as incredible as it is, does have minor imperfections, like her earring, which appears to be a complete hoop earlier on in the video, but then it switches to more of a snail design later on and doesn't form a perfect hoop anymore. But it really does feel like a minor nitpick to point this out when the general scene is so detailed and coherent. This car footage is already hinting at...
Sorry. We saw some of those earlier, but now we're going to look at different forms of AI. So we're going to look at one that generates a voice, right? We're going to look at some that generate images. We're going to look at others that help instructors teach and create activities and designs. And then we're going to play an activity where you have to point out what was human and what is AI. So I'm going to get out of the screen. And I'm going to go to this one first. Okay. So earlier, I was playing around with one called Synthesis, right, which allows me to generate an AI voice. And so the first thing I did is just ask it to generate all the voices possible. And it tells me their name and if they're male or female. And I said, well, okay, I want to listen to Ray's voice, which was a female voice. And it allowed me to listen to it. And let's see if I can play it here.
Hello, this is a sample of Ray's voice. I hope you find it suitable for your needs.
Right, so some of it sounds real, some of it sounds artificial, right? But then I said, okay, well, what if I wanted Ray to tell me about some news about the freshman class that came to Hope this past academic year, which was one of the bigger freshman classes. So I said, do that. And she said, well, I couldn't find specific news. So now we're having this conversation, this interaction. Well, I said, use any data you can find, right? That's a problem. I could say, well, I don't care if it's accurate or not. That's the issue with people being able to generate news. And then it generated this story. I was like, oh, that's great. That sounds really good. I want to know what Ray would say about that.
Welcome to the incoming freshman class of Hope College for the 2020-2023-2024 academic year. As you embark on this exciting journey, remember that you are about to start a significant chapter of your life. The entire college community is thrilled to have you, and we believe each of you brings something special to our campus. We can't wait to see the marks you will leave on Hope College. Welcome aboard, and let's make this academic year unforgettable.
Okay, so again, that sounded pretty artificial, but now imagine that an institution, maybe not Hope, right? Maybe an institution creates a message that gets sent to all of their incoming students, and they add an AI voice that sounds really personable. And now they're more excited to come to campus and be involved in this amazing community. And this only took me a few minutes to do. right, with this simple prompts. I was messing around with the image generation one the other day, and my parents have two French bulldogs, one named Darby and one named Duncan. I was like, create a French bulldog playing soccer for Manchester United. And this is what it gave me. All right. Said, well, this still looks fake. Maybe put him in the stadium, the Theater of Dreams for Manchester United. That looks a little bit better, but then it's like, nah, that's not good. Make him play against Manchester City, Manchester United's rivals. And you can see now we have a bunch of different styles of dogs, some wearing shin guards and cleats, others not. That's kind of fun. Maybe I should send this off to my mom because this looks like her dog, Duncan. All right. So again, ways that AI is kind of interacting with creation. This is Perplexity, right? So this is the same AI that gets used to generate that podcast that we listened to earlier. And I use Perplexity every day. I've actually started to use it more often than ChatGPT because it's like a mixture of ChatGPT and Google. Okay. And what's nice is I can treat this just as I would with Google, asking it some information. So I might say, what is the current state of geopolitics? And let's just say Cuba for some reason. And now I can decide, do I want to give it information? So maybe I found a research study or I found a news article about this specifically. I want to train the AI on that. So I could say, here's an article I want you to use. I'm not going to do that. But I can also say what kind of sources I want to get in return. Right. So possibly I only want to see YouTube videos about that, if that's the way I want to consume my information. Or I want to see academic published articles about that. Right. So now you can see you have more choice as the user. And this is what I showed my students to do. This is how you can start finding resources that are specific to the content area. Well, I don't want to find everything because it's going to pull things from Google. It might pull someone's blog. It might pull things from Pinterest, possibly. Maybe I just want to stay focused on academics. And I'm going to turn on this feature. It used to be called Copilot. They just changed it to Pro. What's nice about this is I will then get a second question possibly to help refine the search or refine the results. So let's see what this looks like. All right, so here's my second question. What do I want to focus on? Let's focus on economy. So everything it's spitting out right now is AI generated, right? There is nothing that was coming from a direct source, right? But I can scroll down and see that it is citing some information, and then I can go directly to that source to see if it is accurate or not. Right? And again, I chose for it to only present academic written papers. If I want to go back, I could change to, let me see everything. Maybe there are things from newspapers that I want to get instead. And it's not just one interaction. I can go back and ask it follow-up questions to refine the story it tells me. Right? So again, examples of using AI for quick searches, getting information. And I did an activity with a communications class where I showed them how to use this in creating a press release. We did an example of the commencement address for this upcoming graduation, and I asked it to write a commencement address as if Cillian Murphy, who was in Oppenheimer, was giving it to Hope students and what to focus on, this idea of rest, relaxation, and disconnecting from technology, and it was incredible. And then students did the same thing, and they had to come up with an idea of someone creating a commencement address. One student wanted Darth Vader to give the commencement address. So you can get accurate information from actual people, or you can give it information about fictional characters, and it will give you some good results too. Okay. Here's an example of Magic School. This is Magic School AI, right? So resources for teachers. What they can do here, right, is you can go through and you can ask it to generate content or change the language of a lesson plan for you, or generate stories for students to practice math problems. Or I can say, oh, I have a student that has a physical disability. How might I rearrange my classroom to make sure that they're able to move about the class? Or if someone has a learning disability, how might I change my lesson to make it more specific towards them, right? So this is a great tool for educators to use to change some of their content, but what might get troublesome is if they're constantly relying on that, right? So this is an interesting one that faculty and teachers are using. So now we're to the game portion of our presentation today. This idea of understanding, is it human or is it an AI? We have a question.
Bill Gates has just let millions of dollars go for disadvantaged learners, specifically for socioeconomic challenged groups, and in the context of math and sciences apparently also. And so the pejorative view is, well, if somebody from a disadvantaged environment is in math and they say 2 + 2 is 5, well, that's good. Let's bring everyone up to equal snuff. Comment about that sort of perspective? I think that's probably left, crazy thinking, but in the context of what you just said about using disadvantaged learners, how does that fit with what Gates is doing?
That's one thing I haven't seen that article or that story about Bill Gates. I think some of the things that K-12 is quicker to adopt some technologies earlier to help students catch up, right? Higher education is a little slower at doing that because they rely on traditional models of learning and understanding. I think there are a lot of ways that organizations impact K-12 worlds, whether it's getting devices in students' hands and almost monopolizing certain districts, right? And deciding, well, you're going to be a Google district, or you're going to be Apple district, or you're going to use this software or not. When I was in teaching kindergarten through 8th grade, there are programs we use to understand why might a student not understand a concept, and it would generate different lessons that we could possibly try for them to understand it quickly. Now, it was me deciding as a teacher, do I want to use those recommendations or not? What's changing is if it's AI deciding to put content in front of that student to help them learn or not, right? And depending on the AI program, it could be really good at making those recommendations and pushing AI generated content to that student to help them learn more effectively. But what it's not doing is creating manipulatives and physical things for the student to move around to understand, right, real world consequences. It's still that student interacting with the screen and not interacting with the person, right? So that might not answer your question entirely, but I hope that people are being more critical about the ways that AI get embedded specifically into educational environments, right? So the two that we're going to do, one's going to be images. So we have to decide if it's an AI generated image or if it's an actual person. The next one will be a video, okay? So let's say, raise your hand if you think this is a generated by AI. All right, now a ton. Raise your hand if you think it is an actual person. Okay, so we'll see if it is a human. All right, so we'll get our results at the end. Again, raise your hand if you think this is generated by AI. Okay, so some of you are looking for clues in the picture. Raise your hand if you think it is an actual human. More of you pick that. All right, again, raise your hand if you think this is generated by AI. Okay, that looks like the majority, so I'm going to do that one. All right, we're getting close to the end. Raise your hand if you think this is generated by AI. Oh, that's almost unanimous. All right, last one. Oop. Raise your hand if you think this was generated by AI. All right, raise your hand if you think it's generated is a human. All right, and we'll get our results. So our first guess, we said generated by, you guessed human. That was actually AI. All right. Second guess, we got wrong. Third guess, we got right. We said it was generated by AI. This one is actual human. Right? So some of us are shocked. And the last one we said was a human, but it is also generated by AI. Right? So now I show this because once you saw the first one, or once you know what you got right and wrong, you would probably look at the images a little differently or focus on specific things in it, right? Again, we're in the context that we're trying to pick those things out. I doubt when we're looking at the news or we're reading a newspaper or we're looking at things online, are we constantly asking ourselves, is this AI, is this not? And just think about the cognitive load that will start putting on us if we're always doing that. Okay. So now we're going to do it with videos. All right, so we get 2 videos here, and then we have to decide which one is fake and which one is real. Now, don't necessarily focus on the speed because they can just speed up. But I'll play it again. All right, raise your hand if you think the one of the tree is AI generated. Okay, raise your hand if you think it is this one over here, the yellow dots. Okay. Again, we'll get our results at the end. All right, so here's one of some nature, some bikes. I'll play them again. We have one doing a jump and one following a bike. All right, raise your hand if you think this one is AI generated, the one where the bike is being followed. All right, that looks like the majority. This might be disturbing just because watching people eat isn't always fun, but and then we'll watch this one. Play both of them again. All right, raise your hand if you think the person working out and eating a burger is AI generated. All right, that looks like the majority to me. We have some eye videos. All right, I'll play one more time. All right, raise your hand if you think this one is AI generated. Okay, some of you are finding the tells. All right, and I believe we may have seen an example of one of these already, so you might know. All right, raise your hand if you think the guy with the glasses is AI generated. Okay, all of our hands should be up because we saw that with the example earlier, right? So for the sake of time, and I want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions, I'm just going to go through the last couple and just say which ones are fake. Okay, so based on our results, we got 6 out of 10 correctly. If you were to do this on your own, you would see, as I said earlier, the ones that are fake have a little watermark in the corner, but you weren't able to see those ones, right? What were some other things that gave you some kind of hint that they may have been AI generated? If you want to raise your hand. Yeah, all the way in the back. Okay. Yeah, abnormal pattern. Okay. Yes. Right here. Okay. Yep. Not being mirrored correctly. Any other tells? Yeah. But again, just think about when you're watching that, the things that you're looking for, most of the time, especially when you're looking at videos of people, you're probably looking at their face, looking them in their eyes, right? Not looking for their hand gestures or the texture of their skin. And so things to be thinking about. Right, we are at the point in the presentation where it is time for questions. And at your tables, again, I put some note cards. That's for if we run out of time, because I'm coming back next week and I want to be able to answer your questions and still generate some discussion. So if you have a question that we don't get to today, please write it on the note card. I'll take that back with me as I'm prepping the next presentation. And hopefully we can continue to have a really good discussion. Looks like we have one question possibly from online, and then we'll go.
Yep. So this question online is talking about when other people in your house, or if you're outside, you suddenly get ads based on what people are searching. Is that AI crossing device boundaries based on location? And how can you stop that?
That's a good question. So it's not necessarily AI crossing boundaries. One of the things that our brains do when we filter information is that, like, if we've talked about it, it's kind of like when you are looking to buy a new car, you start seeing that car everywhere, right? Because your brain is telling yourself this is what you should be looking for. So a lot of times too, when we're having conversations and we recognize something, now we're filtering that information again, and we're recognizing when it gets brought up or when we see that ad, right? So it's not necessarily being crossing boundaries because of AI. Our brains are just looking for that more often. It's most likely not when someone is using an AI tool specifically, but what those tools get their data from. So for example, Google's AI, it uses all of our Google information. So if you have Google on your phone, or use email, or you search for things, or use maps, well, it's collecting data to then put into algorithms to make personalized ads for you.
So my question goes back to when you mentioned that I think it was ChatGPT got in trouble for using the YouTube videos. Was that the issue with I guess ChatGPT coming up with major prejudices in their results?
So there's a model that came up with images, I believe.
For a short time.
Yes.
That it was available and they got.
Yeah, I think that was Google. But yeah, sometimes programmers can put into the models to be like, remove all bias. So then it can say, well, if I'm removing all bias, well, then I can make a picture of, I think the example may have been like a Nazi soldier. Well, I can make the example of that, well, why is a Nazi soldier not white? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, now it's trying to remove any kinds of things. And that was a bad example. And they released it onto the public. And then people were able to put in prompts to generate some of those ideas and working with the systems. And that's one thing that users are trying to investigate is, well, what loopholes can I get through based on the way I ask a question, right? So there has to be a lot of human interaction with these systems, but there also has to be societal interaction with these systems to make them more accurate and trustworthy. Yeah. Question then possibly here.
You've probably seen in the news that OpenAI has recently had to hire over a dozen lawyers because of the number of lawsuits from folks who say you used my intellectual property for training and you didn't compensate or ask permission.
Yes, I have seen that in the news a lot, and that's where different parties are coming together to sign some of these letters to say you have to stop what is capable with some of these AIs, or you can't make any more advancements and stuff like that. The next thing is, how do we prove that the models took someone's intellect, right? Because it's not citing the information. And as we saw earlier, every time you interact with it, it gives a different, just a little tweak here and there. So you can't say, oh, this one gave me that same result as this one, and I can say where that information came from. So these companies need to be more transparent and say what data it was trained on, but also there have to be other safeguards to say, how do we make websites so that they can't be scraped to steal some of that information too? What alarms me is the organizations and the institutions that are partnering with some of these companies, because they can decide what data to use, what data not to use, and then turn on or off certain abilities to scan that data. So for example, I think it was Arizona University is partnering with ChatGPT to make its own version of AI. Other news organizations are buying into some of these because they're really fast and it takes a lot of money to make these AI programs. So why not just like buy a subscription? But then they're kind of beholden to those companies, and that's a little frightening. And it's just hard for other smaller organizations to keep up. So they also feel kind of like the news organizations, because of market pressures and advancements in technology, they have to do something, and we have to do something now. But good question.
You asked us to vote on 5 different examples. Who in the world were you putting into the computer what you thought the percentage of our hand raising was?
No.
How was that determined?
Percentage of like, which one should we pick?
Yes, that we picked, that 6 out of 10 were right and the others were wrong. How was that determined? How we voted? How was it determined how we in this room voted on those 5 examples?
Yeah, all of you use your own understanding of like what things you thought were AI related, and I simply just did what looked like to be the majority of the vote, and then I picked that one. But I've played those several times, and it took me a few times going through it to, well, the picture one, you see which ones you get wrong, so you could just do it again and get them correct. But the video one, it doesn't show you which ones you get wrong. So you're kind of learning the clues of what sticks out to eventually get them right. But again, the cognitive load is just going to be a lot, because you're going to be seeing new images and videos every single day. You have to decide whether it's AI generated or not. Yeah. Yeah, I chose the vote. Yeah.
I want to tell you a story where AI was helpful. My husband passed away of Parkinson's a year ago, and we could tell as a family that his brain was deteriorating, but he decided that he wanted to write a book about the mission trips that he had sponsored. So he started writing and got a few pages done and sent it into his editor. And it came back with lots of information about Holland and Nakatawa and the whole thing. He was so excited, and it validated what he had done, even though we realized that probably AI had written it. And then, of course, there's a connection when the editor says, now, if you want to send me $800 more, then right. We will help you with the next chapter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is extremely helpful, right? And there are ways that people are using to kind of capture those moments, right? There's one, you might know Jack Nicklaus, the famous golfer, right? Like he's partnering with an organization to create a AI simulation of himself to be a golf instructor for future generations. So that's kind of amazing that they can take old videos of him and old recordings of him doing interviews and still ask him questions today to generate this. And so he will always be a part of golf now and forever. Right. Yes. Yeah. But also kind of, it is a little weird to look at. Right. So I think the social norm will eventually change to, it just feels natural. Right. But it's jarring. Right. Yeah.
Well, our time is up, and I encourage you to write your questions down on the pad in front of you, and we'll see you all next week. And help me thank Zach for a great time.
Thank you. If you have your device and you want to send me a question that will come to my phone, you can scan that QR code and type your question as well. Right. Thank you, everybody.